The room was unusually quiet the day the baby was born. What should have been a moment filled with loud cries and happy tears turned into a tense silence that wrapped itself around the young parents like a heavy blanket. The newborn lay still, her tiny chest rising and falling softly, but something was clearly wrong. Doctors moved quickly, whispering in low voices, running tests, checking reflexes that never came. When the final diagnosis arrived, it hit like a storm. The baby was paralyzed from the waist down. For the parents, time seemed to stop. Dreams they had built during months of anticipation shattered in seconds. They were told that their daughter might never walk, might never run in a park, might never feel the grass under her feet. The doctors spoke gently but honestly. Medical science could offer therapy, support, and time, but no guarantees. As the days passed, the hospital room became a place of mixed emotions: love, fear, hope, and deep uncertainty. Weeks later, during one of the many consultations, a doctor made an unexpected recommendation. He suggested something that had nothing to do with medicine, surgery, or machines. He recommended a dog. The parents were stunned. A dog? They had expected another therapy plan or a new medication, not an animal. The doctor explained calmly. He had seen cases where children with physical challenges responded in remarkable ways to animals. Dogs, he said, can awaken emotions, stimulate movement, and create a sense of connection that no machine ever could. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it could become a powerful part of the baby's life. At first, the idea felt strange. How could a dog help a paralyzed baby? Friends and relatives were skeptical. Some thought it was a waste of time, others worried it would add more responsibility to an already overwhelmed family. But the parents had reached a point where hope, no matter how unusual, was worth trying. After long discussions and sleepless nights, they agreed. They adopted a gentle female dog from a local shelter. She was not a trained therapy animal, just a calm, affectionate dog with warm eyes and a quiet nature. From the very first day she entered the house, something changed. The dog seemed to sense that the baby was special. She approached the crib slowly, sat down, and simply watched, her tail moving softly against the floor. What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of ignoring the baby or acting nervous, the dog began visiting the crib every day. She would lie beside it for hours, resting her head near the baby's tiny hands. Sometimes, she would gently lick the baby's fingers, other times she would just stay still, breathing calmly. The baby, who often seemed distant and quiet, started reacting. Her eyes followed the dog. Her fingers twitched when the warm tongue touched her skin. Doctors had said the baby's lower body was paralyzed, but they never said she couldn't feel joy. And joy began to appear in small, beautiful ways. The baby smiled more often. She laughed when the dog wagged her tail. She made sounds that the parents had never heard before. It was as if the dog had unlocked a door inside her that fear and sadness had kept closed. As months passed, something even more unexpected happened. During physical therapy sessions at home, the dog would sit nearby, watching closely. Whenever the baby struggled or cried, the dog would stand up and gently place her head against the baby's legs. The parents noticed tiny reactions, small muscle movements, slight changes in posture. At first, they thought they were imagining things. But the therapists noticed too. They explained that emotional stimulation can play a powerful role in physical response. The baby's brain was forming new connections, responding not just to exercises but to feelings, comfort, safety, happiness. The dog had become a source of motivation. The baby tried harder when the dog was nearby, as if she wanted to reach her, to touch her, to be closer. The dog's actions became even more surprising. She started bringing toys and placing them near the baby's legs. She would nudge the baby gently, then look at her parents as if asking them to watch. Sometimes she would lie on her back and kick her legs in the air, almost like she was showing the baby how to move. No one had trained her to do this. It came naturally. Visitors who came to the house were shocked. They expected to see a sad child and exhausted parents. Instead, they saw a home filled with warmth. They saw a baby laughing at a dog's silly behavior. They saw hope living quietly in everyday moments. Over the years, the bond between the baby and the dog grew unbreakable. The baby learned to sit with support, then to move using assistive devices. Every milestone, no matter how small, was celebrated. And the dog was always there, beside her during exercises, beside her during naps, beside her during tears. Doctors never claimed the dog cured the paralysis. Science remained honest. But they did acknowledge something remarkable: the child's progress exceeded expectations. Her emotional strength was extraordinary. Her confidence was rare. She didn't see herself as broken or limited. To her, life was full of love, play, and companionship. As the child grew older, she began telling people about her best friend, the dog who never left her side. She said the dog made her feel strong, even on days when her body felt weak. She said the dog listened without words and understood without questions. When the dog grew old, her movements slowed, just like the child's once had. Roles reversed in a quiet, touching way. The child would comfort the dog, stroke her fur, and sit beside her for hours. The same patience, loyalty, and love returned in full circle. When the dog eventually passed away, the loss was deep. But the gift she left behind was greater than grief. She had helped shape a life filled with courage. She had taught a family that healing doesn't always come from hospitals or prescriptions. Sometimes, it comes on four legs, with a wagging tail and a heart full of love. The doctor's recommendation had once sounded unbelievable. Now, it felt unforgettable. Everyone who had doubted was left amazed, not by a miracle cure, but by the quiet power of compassion, connection, and a dog who chose to love without limits. When the child turned 4, the world began to notice her in ways no one had expected. She still couldn't walk on her own, but her presence filled every room she entered. Her laughter was loud, confident, contagious. People no longer looked at her with pity first, they noticed her spirit. And right beside her, always, was the dog, now older, slower, but just as devoted. By this time, doctors had become deeply interested in her progress. Medical files that once carried cautious, limited predictions were now filled with notes of surprise. Her upper body strength was far beyond average. Her coordination, balance while sitting, and emotional resilience were exceptional. Therapists often said the same thing in quiet conversations with her parents: there's something different about her motivation. That something had 4 legs. Every therapy session had become a kind of game. The dog played a central role, though no one had ever taught her how. When exercises became difficult, the dog would position herself just out of reach, encouraging the child to stretch forward. When frustration led to tears, the dog would gently place her head on the child's lap, grounding her emotions instantly. The crying would stop, replaced by determination. What amazed professionals the most was the child's relationship with movement. Many children with similar conditions developed fear of falling, fear of pain, fear of failure. But this child didn't fear trying. Failure had never scared her, because every attempt was met with unconditional support. If she slipped, the dog stayed. If she struggled, the dog waited. There was no judgment, only presence. At school, the story continued. When the child started attending a special education program, administrators hesitated when the parents asked if the dog could accompany her. Policies were discussed, rules reviewed, concerns raised. But after meeting the dog and seeing their bond, the school agreed to a trial period. It didn't take long for doubts to disappear. The dog lay quietly during lessons, alert but calm. When the child participated in group activities, the dog followed closely, acting almost like an emotional anchor. Other children were drawn to them, not out of curiosity or discomfort, but admiration. The dog became a bridge, helping classmates connect naturally with the child. Conversations started easily, friendships formed. Teachers noticed something else too. The child spoke up more. She raised her hand. She helped others. She showed leadership. The confidence she carried wasn't loud or forced, it was steady and real. At home, life had transformed in ways the parents never could have imagined during those dark early days. The house that once felt heavy with fear was now full of routine, laughter, and quiet victories. They no longer counted what their daughter couldn't do. They celebrated what she did, every small improvement, every brave attempt, every smile. There were still hard days. Pain didn't disappear. Challenges didn't vanish. There were nights filled with questions about the future, moments of exhaustion, flashes of grief for the life they once imagined. But those moments no longer controlled them. Hope had become stronger than fear. As the years passed, the dog aged gracefully. Her muzzle turned gray. Her steps slowed. The child noticed before anyone else did. She began adjusting her pace, waiting longer, speaking to the dog more softly. She understood aging not as loss, but as change. One evening, after a particularly long day, the child sat quietly beside the dog and said something that left her parents speechless. She helped me learn how to be patient, she said. Now I help her. It was in that moment they realized something profound. The dog hadn't just supported their daughter physically or emotionally. She had shaped her character. She had taught empathy, resilience, loyalty, and love in its purest form. Doctors, therapists, and visitors often ask the parents the same question: would you recommend this to others? The answer was never simple. They never claimed a dog was a cure. They never promised miracles. Instead, they shared their truth. They spoke about connection, about emotional safety, about how healing is not always visible on scans or charts. Sometimes it shows up in confidence, in joy, in the courage to keep trying. As a teenager, the child began sharing her story publicly. She spoke at small events, schools, and support groups. She never portrayed herself as a victim. She spoke as someone who had lived fully, loved deeply, and learned early that strength doesn't always come from muscles, it comes from the heart. She always mentioned the dog. She described how a simple recommendation had changed everything. How people had laughed at the idea. How love had proven stronger than doubt. Audience members often cried, not because the story was sad, but because it was honest and hopeful. When the dog finally reached the end of her life, the family faced a goodbye they had always known would come, but were never ready for. The house felt quieter than it ever had. The child grieved deeply, openly, without shame. She understood loss, but she also understood gratitude. At the dog's resting place, the child said softly, "You didn't fix me. You walked with me." That sentence stayed with everyone who heard it. Years later, when the child became an adult, she chose a path inspired by her own life. She worked with children facing physical challenges. She advocated for emotional support in medical care. She reminded professionals that healing is not only about fixing bodies, but nurturing spirits. And every time she told her story, people were surprised, not by paralysis, not by limitations, but by the quiet truth at its center. Sometimes, the most powerful help doesn't come in the form we expect. Sometimes, it arrives with a wagging tail, patient eyes, and a heart that knows exactly what to do, without ever being told.